Thank you, Yellow. Thank you, Lisa, and good morning, Maine MDF. Climate change is real. As a kid growing up in Maine, we never used air conditioners. This summer was one of the hottest on record. At times this summer, it felt like New Jersey, hot and humid. Our world is heating up faster each year. Demographic change is also real. And the U.S. is now more racially diverse than ever before. All the new population growth in the United States and Maine in the last 10 years came from Asian, Hispanic, and multiracial populations. The world, as we know, has completely changed. It is hot and multicultural. Something I was never described as. Yellow, yes, he's hot and multicultural. Me, not so much. This is a tumbleweed in the snow in the middle of winter in South Dakota. The 2020 U.S. Census report was released this summer. Maine was ranked as the least diverse and whitest state in the nation. That means more black and brown people would rather live among the tumbleweeds in South Dakota than in Maine. We have a problem. We have a very big problem. Here are Maine and South Dakota's racial demographics. As you can see, South Dakota is far more racially diverse than Maine. Climate change is real, and people and companies are making changes and are adapting and preparing for it. Demographic change is also real, and businesses and communities that do not adapt or prepare for it will become tumbleweeds. If South Dakota is more welcoming to people of color, then we need to do better. We can do better. Here is the U.S. Census for the past 20 years. I highlighted numbers I would like you to pay particular attention to in red and blue. As you can see, the population in the U.S. has been steadily declining, and if it were not for the Asian, Hispanic, and multiracial populations, the U.S. would have had no population growth for the past 10 years. The white population fell by 11.3% in the last 20 years, and the Asian, Hispanic, and multiracial populations grew by 12.7% in the same time period. An interesting observation is the growth of multiracial population category, which was first introduced in 2000. We are no longer a binary nation, meaning we cannot look at race in terms of black and white. It is and will be a multiracial population. The multiracial population will be what the millennials are to the overall population. The multiracial population will shape our political, civic, and consumer future. Diversity, equity, and inclusion of all races will be more prominent and more important in the coming years. This is also true for Maine. Here is Maine's U.S. Census for the last 10 years. Maine's white population decreased and the racial and ethnic population grew at an incredible rate, particularly the multiracial population. This population grew by 188%, and they number almost 50,000 people in Maine. For the second time in a decade, the racial minority populations fueled Maine's population growth. The racial minority population is more than the 2019 projections of about 100,000 people. It is now 132,000 people, and if this population was a county in Maine, they would be the fourth most populous county behind Penobscot at 152,000 people and ahead of Kennebec County at 122,000 people. The most critical number in the racial minority population grew by 83%, whereas the white population shrank by 2,800 people in the last 10 years. This is good news for Maine. Maine needed more people of color, and we needed more people in general. We, however, must not forget that Maine's diversity numbers still lag the rest of the nation, and we're competing with the second and third oldest whitest states in the nation in New Hampshire and Vermont for the same resource: talented young people and families. These racial populations are younger in age, The median age for multiracial and Hispanic is almost 20 years younger than the national median age, and more than half of the U.S. children under the age of 18 come from these groups. We must also not forget the Black and Indigenous populations. If it were not for them, Maine would not be multicultural. But their consumer workforce strategies may be different because these groups, their median age are older and their population growth is more stagnant. The bottom line is clear. From the 2020 U.S. Census, if we do not invest in recruiting, hiring, retaining, researching, and reaching out to multicultural and racial workforce and consumers, we will become tumbleweeds. If the only population in the U.S. and Maine that are growing are multicultural populations, specifically multiracial, Hispanic, and Asian, then these populations are the future workforce and consumers of the United States, and we need to make them a priority for recruiting, hiring, and retention. The demographic change, like climate change, is here, and it is real, and it's happened faster than we thought. And we as a state need to be aggressive in adapting to a new and more multicultural and racial United States. Recruit, hire, retain, research, and reach out. This should be Maine's motto to grow and evolve our new economy. Recruit. According to the Maine Development Foundation's 2019 Measures of Growth report, to align with the goal of Maine's 10-year economic strategy, Maine needs 75,000 more workers by 2030. Unfortunately, we have seen a decline of 65,000 workers in recent years as Maine has more retirees than people entering the workforce. We have the oldest population in the nation, and we have more deaths than births. There are, however, nearly 10,000 students of color and 132,000 people of color living in Maine, and almost 2.5 million people of color in the tri-state area, Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. This is a great opportunity to recruit, hire, and retain people of color. The math is clear. We cannot grow our population by hoping that recruiting people who moved away from Maine to come back to Maine will meet our workforce needs. Live Work in Maine and other recruitment organizations need to make multicultural and racial recruitment a top priority. Their staff and strategies should reflect the demographic shift that is taking place in Maine and the United States. A mistake many recruiters make in recruiting people of color is casting a national net, hoping people of color from far corners of the U.S. with no family connections or relationships to Maine or northern New England will come and move to Maine permanently. Don't get me wrong, sometimes this strategy works, but most often it does not. So where do we recruit? I would focus on other northern New England states, particularly Massachusetts, our local college campuses, and the immigrant refugee populations. Massachusetts has over 2.25 million people of color, and 1 million of them are immigrants. Many are school and university age. It's easier to convince a person of color who grew up in northern New England to move to Maine than someone who is unfamiliar with our culture and climate. We also need to recruit from the nearly 10,000 students of color attending our Maine colleges and universities. Many of them are from northern New England states. Lastly, we have a large immigrant and refugee population. For example, the majority of the Black growth in Maine came from refugees and asylum seekers. The Black population grew by 70%, and many in this population are from the refugee and asylum seeker populations, and many have college degrees. So how do we recruit from these communities and groups? For many, networking helps to find job opportunities. If people of color are not part of your network, you need to build and have relationships with diverse communities. You need to do the work. Luckily, building relationships is not mysterious. It's fun. It's also easy because networking in Maine and Massachusetts is a matter of few degrees of separation. Everyone knows everyone eventually. Perhaps the easiest way to network is to connect with our local colleges and university campuses. Multicultural directors, deans of students, and various racial and ethnic groups on campuses are well poised to offer and receive opportunities for job internships and apprenticeships for their diverse student populations. It is worth the effort. For example, Southern Maine Community College alone has 1,000 students of color ready to contribute to the workforce. Numerous towns in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts have a high concentration of people of color. By working with local officials, community ethnic leaders, navigators, and groups in schools, you may be able to build relationships and potential workers. For example, in Maine, half of Portland and Lewiston's public schools populations is made up of students of color and multicultural populations. Regionally, Lowell, Massachusetts has 30 to 35,000 Cambodians, the second largest in the United States behind Long Beach, California. And there are many other towns and cities in Massachusetts and New Hampshire and other New England states with large ethnic and racial populations. Hire. In Maine, with a large refugee, asylum, and immigrant population, hiring first-time workers will require a different strategy. For many of the nearly 60,000 immigrants and refugees living in Maine, English is not their first language. Recruiters and interviewers should consider how and where they advertise their positions and whether their application process is friendly to potential English as a second language candidates. You can ask your hiring teams to explore if the questions you ask will reflect openness to new skills and new experiences. If the expectation is to replace a worker who was born and raised in Maine with someone who fits the same culture and skills, then finding that person of color to meet those expectations will likely falter. Remember, we are in a demographic change. The hiring process for new workers will be about adapting to new ideas, cultures, and expertise. Hiring for potential and hiring people who are willing to learn and grow with you, regardless of their background, will yield powerful results for your business. A great opportunity to hire people of color is from business internships. Maine State Chamber of Commerce is working with a number of great partners to create comprehensive business internships for non-traditional older students of color from USM and SMCC. And we welcome other colleges and universities in Southern Maine to partner with us in this initial pilot project. The Maine State Chamber is partnering with the Greater Portland Chamber of Commerce and local businesses to find guaranteed internship spots for our students of color. We're also partnering with WEX, Educate Maine, Focus Maine, and Thomas College and participating college and university student services to create supportive services to ensure the success of non-traditional students' color internship. Our support systems include professional mentors of color, the Equity Fund to offset barriers to internships such as childcare and transportation, college and university student services, and racial and cultural training for business internship coordinators. If we can create a positive internship for older non-traditional students of color, we will create a pipeline for the students of color to be hired by businesses. Older students of color are among the least likely to apply for internship, but their maturity, social skills, and diverse life experiences make them a great candidate for hire. If we are successful, our goal is to replicate this program with other chambers throughout the state of Maine, Lewiston, Bangor, Biddeford, and beyond. Why are support systems so important? When interns, employees of color feel safe, supported, welcomed, and valued, they know that their opportunities are directly tied to their performance, regardless of their race and ethnicity. They will stay. The person who is best positioned to promote this positive culture is an employee's direct supervisor. When the supervisor is an ally and part of the support system to help people of color to succeed, the likelihood of retaining that employee is greatly increased. All frontline supervisors should be as well-versed in diversity, equity, inclusion work as the CEO and leadership. Equity work is done in small teams and small departments. Leadership rooted in equity makes the difference, whether it is the corner office or on the warehouse floor. Research. The multiracial, multicultural population in Maine is an economic engine, on track for future commerce and workforce development. The purchasing power of this population is $2.7 billion. Two of Maine's cities, Portland and Lewiston, account for $2 billion in total. Little is known about how this population spends $2.7 billion. Even less is known about the products or services they utilize. What are their banking needs? What kinds of seafood and produce do they consume? Where do they purchase products? What kind of retail needs do they have, and where do they vacation? The multiracial and multicultural purchasing power in the tri-state area is $94 billion. The multicultural and multiracial purchasing power in the United States is $4.7 billion. If we do not research local, regional, and national multicultural and racial spending, we will miss out on the future commerce in Maine, the region, and the United States. I am partnering with Professor Richard Bilodeau of USM School of Business to do a focus group of multicultural and racial populations on food systems, because little is known about their food purchasing habits. We hope to explore other sectors, but with this research in food systems, we hope to create 3 outcomes that will change food systems in Maine. The focus group research will show us where and what kinds of products people of color are purchasing or not purchasing. This data will give us an opportunity to educate Maine grocers to expand their products and to encourage Maine farmers to grow ethnic produce and protein. The data will also give us feedback to the grocers about how comfortable people of color feel in their stores and with their staff. This will hopefully improve the shopping experience for people of color, which now number 132,000 people. This is important for 2 reasons. The first is obvious. It's good for sales. But the second is that if a person of color has a good shopping experience, they're more likely to work for that organization over another. The last is that Professor Bilodeau and I will develop a curriculum to teach future marketing students at USM to be more cognizant of multicultural and racial consumer needs and demands. We know so little about multicultural spending in Maine, the region, and nationally. It is a new discipline. Nielsen Prison is a valued national marketing research company. It created 68 categories to differentiate the vast consumer tastes in the U.S., from affluent families to poor rural families to inner-city singles who recycle to retirees who camp in RVs and more. But there are only 3 categories that target multicultural and multiracial populations, which number 140 million people. Here is Nielsen Prism's quick description for immigrants. The multiculti mosaic is the urban home for a mixed populace of Hispanic, Asian, African-American singles and families. Nielsen describes them as having a Honda, eat at Church's, owning a Nissan, eat at Church's Chicken, shop at Ross's, follow Mexican Soccer League, stay at Motel 6, watch Telemundo, and listen to urban adult contemporary music. This hasn't been my experience. Can you imagine an elderly woman who's Asian or African watching Telemundo in Spanish? This highlights how even at the national level, they do not understand multiracial and multicultural populations. Research and knowledge of multicultural and racial populations is critical to our new economy. Reach out. If Maine wants to evolve, find more workers, grow our economy, it needs to have a more significant presence in domestic markets. All of Maine should be making connections to communities of color. In Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and beyond, build relationships to recruit, hire, retain people of color to increase commerce for Maine businesses. This means an aggressive marketing campaign with people of color in Maine and beyond. It means recruiters working with multicultural navigators, consultants to meet and greet, to build relationships with people of color. In Maine, we spend more time and effort trying to make new programs and deals with the country of Ireland than we do with people of color living in our backyard or less than 100 miles away from the Maine border. Our priorities need to change. If we miss out on this opportunity, if we do not recruit, hire, retain, research, and reach out, we will not evolve. We will slowly wither, dry out, and become a tumbleweed. Thank you.